Welcome to Medical Media Mixer, the perfect cocktail. I'm Nicole Peniston, psychologist.
And I'm Tara Prisco, physician assistant. And today we have a guest with us. It's an honor to have an actual filmmaker on with us. So we have Paula Crichton De Alba. Welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So a little bit about how this all happened, and then we'll introduce Paula and go through everything. This was inspired by my 8th graders' social studies project. This episode, they told her she could do any sort of a historical anything and write a paper on it as long as she researched it properly. So she was researching the toxic cosmetics used in the Victorian era. And I said, this is perfect. Now I just need to find a film to go with it. And then we found you. So that was quite exciting. Actually, there's nobody else who really covers this in the way that you do. So it's very unique.
Thank you. Yeah, that's part of the reason why I made it is because I looked it up and I just couldn't find many films that were touching the subject.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, what led you into filmmaking.
Yeah, of course. So let's see. I've always kind of been a storyteller since I was a kid, and I went through the progression of first painting when I was a kid and then photography. And then it kind of felt like I wanted to expand the medium. So I decided to go into film school. And part of it too was because when I was debating what I should do in college, I've always really loved history and find history so fascinating. So I was like, but I'm also an artist. So I'm like, if I do the film track, then I can just make films, make art, and also kind of, express my interest for history through it. So that's kind of the initial part of it all. Yeah.
Okay. So I see, I looked a little bit at your website and I see you do quite a variety of things, a lot of music videos and quite a few short films. Are all your short films historically based then?
Not all of them, but most of them.
Okay.
I will say the stuff that I write tends to be, I feel the most drawn to stories that are set in different time periods because I think it's a great way to tell stories while also having the audience being able to be open to taking in a message that if it's set in modern time, they might not necessarily do so. Something about it being in a different time period, I feel like creates a disconnect in a sense. So subconsciously, I think people absorb more information that way.
Oh,
That's my
really,
theory.
I see that though. I absolutely do. They can draw those parallels when it's a little bit more separated from their real life.
Yeah, I think people probably focus more too when it's something a little bit different from their day-to-day experience. So you kind of draws you in more too.
Yeah, I agree.
So what we'll do is let me start with the cocktail. Our friend Claude AI made it for me. It's called the English Rose. It's a dark gothic gin based. It's supposed to be a little more purple, but my activated charcoal made it a little too black. So it's 2 ounces of dry gin, half an ounce of creme de violette, half an ounce of cynar, which is an artichoke amaro, which is very herbal, 3/4 of an ounce of lemon juice, half an ounce of activated charcoal simple syrup. So I took 1 capsule of activated charcoal and mixed it with some simple syrup, 1/4 ounce of peated scotch, 1 ounce of egg white or aquafaba. I use this other brand that's a vegan brand, and then 1 ounce of chilled butterfly pea flower tea. So you're really supposed to rinse the glass with scotch, and I wasn't going to buy a whole bottle of scotch just to rinse the glass and throw it out. So I omitted that part. Sorry, Claude. But you're supposed to give it, I guess, a cloudy finish in the glass. You're supposed to take all of the ingredients and shake them without ice first for 15 seconds, and then add ice and shake again for another 15 seconds until chilled. Double strain into a rinsed coupe glass, and it's a very deep, inky blue violet, and a little extra lemon drop on the top is supposed to make it a little lighter, but I think my activated charcoal took over. But here is what it looks like with the foam on the top, and I did taste it, and it is very floral, so it perfectly fits the title.
Cheers to that.
All right.
What a lovely little teacup she just put
So
in there.
cute.
Very on theme.
It is. It fits the time. So the film we're covering is The English Rose, which is a short horror. And it sounds like you independently funded this.
Yes, we did a crowdfund campaign via Seed and Spark.
Very nice. And I did read, I was on your IMDb at some moment. I lost that tab, but that you had won some awards even for this film, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah, it did pretty good in the festival circuit. It got, we won Best Horror at Pasadena International Film Festival. And then we were nominated for a bunch of things on Simi Film Festival, and we won for Best Hair Makeup at that festival.
Well, I mean, that's a huge part of this, so that's definitely a
Yeah.
compliment. And so the stars of your film, Elizabeth May Allen plays the main character, Eloise Ainsworth, and Angela, is that Lieb, plays Constance. This came out in 2024 and has been going around the festival circuit. So why don't you tell me a little bit walk us through the storyline. You can talk about anything in the film that stands out, talk about the sets, the colors, the whole thing. Give us the lowdown.
Yeah, of course. So basically, I wrote this story because one, I knew about this part of history about the toxic cosmetics, and I just found it so interesting. And then I saw that there's not really much out there that explores it. So what I decided to do was to then write a story with a specific location in mind where I was hoping to shoot it, which is Heritage Square Museum here in LA. It's like an actual kind of like a village where they moved a lot of historical houses from the 1900s. And it's just like a preservation museum. It's amazing. If you guys
That's
ever
beautiful. Yeah.
have an opportunity to check it out. So I wrote it with that location in mind because I was already, I would frequent there. And so we pretty much just had like a picture ready location we shot at. It's an actual time period house from the time period. It's furnished. So then I basically just brought my apartment worth of decor and we just did it very just scrappy and very passion project very much with all my friends and such. But yeah, how the process of it was, we crowdfunded for it and it went really well. It was a 1 day shoot, if you can believe it. It was a very
Wow.
ambitious 1 day, but we made it work. We were super prepared ahead of time, so we just that and having just a great team just made us power through it. And then about the story itself, so I wanted to explore something that dealt with toxic cosmetics and also our relationship to it, especially as women, in the sense that there's so many societal pressures put on us to look a certain way, behave a certain way. So I wanted this main character to be kind of going through a couple layers of that, in the sense that she has been recently kind of married off in a way to this man who is a widower. And then as soon as she arrives into this room that used to be the man's previous wife, she just keeps seeing all these signs of what this woman used to be. And, the lady's maid keeps mentioning how she was so beautiful. And basically, there's a portrait of this woman just hanging on a wall, kind of just gleaming over her as kind of what she does not feel like she can achieve herself.
Right.
So, yeah. And in that process, she finds some cosmetics from the previous wife and decides to put him on because she's about to get her portrait taken. And in that process, she gets a sore and then she keeps covering up with more cosmetics, and she spirals into this whole of just basically intoxicating herself.
Right.
And yeah, that's the plot line.
Yeah. So it was interesting. Nicole and I watched it together, and I feel like it definitely was very both literal and sort of like, what's the other word?
Not
Not
literal,
literal, but
figurative.
figurative. There you go. Thank you. Words, they're hard because, I interpreted more in the figurative way and she was interpreting it more in the literal way, which is funny because she's the psychologist. Is that your intention, to see it both ways?
Yeah, it's definitely, it kind of leaves that room for the audience to decide for themselves, especially with the ending, that it kind of leaves you like, did she kill herself using these? Did she not? You know what I mean? So I did want it to kind of be left up to interpretation of, did she just poison herself in a literal way or also in a metaphorical way by,
Right. Right.
putting these thoughts in her head. So it was very much on purpose that I left it that way. So I love to hear that you guys had mixed
Yeah, we both had.
reactions there.
Yeah. And I noticed very much that the set had those colors, the green that it's known for arsenic, and just that muted look to it. I know you said the set was pretty much there, but as far as like film technique, is there certain things that you have to do then to achieve what you're looking for with that?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was the wallpaper on the location was already there. So we had a basic color scheme we were working with already based on that. But for example, with the wardrobe, that I had control over, right? So I wanted a bold dress for her to be wearing. And originally I really wanted to get a green dress. But, when you're making a period piece on a budget, it's a lot more of what you have access to. So we did not manage to get a green bold dress, but we did get a red one instead, which I thought was great because it still worked with the imagery of the blood, the sore that
Yeah.
happens in her face. But yeah, I wish I could have had a green one though. That's definitely something I would have loved because it's just, yeah, So good.
The red is for mercury instead then.
There you go.
You can't escape it.
Yeah.
No, exactly. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the poisons, and then we'll talk a little bit about the psychological aspect as well as sort of modern day cosmetics. So the main, in the Victorian era, which is 1830s to early 1900s, all of these things sort of peaked, but a lot of them have been used throughout history. So there'll be some nods to some even older uses. Arsenic being probably one of the biggest. Arsenic had these wafers that they would sell to women openly in the good old Sears and Roebuck catalog and at your local drugstore. And they called them safe, quote, complexion wafers. So, they were marketed as harmless. Women nibbled on them like candy, basically. They wanted to clear their freckles and have that porcelain skin. And as we just spoke of, the emerald green dye often used arsenic, which was the fashionable color of the time. And if you take a look now at some of these gowns, they could have, 900 grains of arsenic embedded in the gown. And basically you're shedding or absorbing that into your body when you're dancing and sweating in this era. So that's pretty amazing. They also use some hot spring baths and things like that for full body soaking for arsenic. And then, as we mentioned, the wallpaper was very prominent through that area. The thing about arsenic is it actually builds a tolerance. And so you get so used to using it that they bring on ill effects like vomiting and stomach pain when they stop. So that's very curious. That's not something I knew about this beforehand. So some things that we would see in an acute state of poisoning would be nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, encephalopathy, which is a fancy word for basically changes of the brain, neuropathy, which would be numbness, tingling in your fingers and toes, abnormal heart rhythms, blood pressure issues, and then just cardiovascular collapse. So that's really the acute setting. The chronic is more what they saw during that era because people were using small amounts over long periods of time. And so it's interesting, even though they were trying to have one shade of their skin, it would actually cause the opposite at times. It would cause hyperpigmentation. So they would call it raindrops on a dusty road, which is dark and light patches. So I'm not even sure why they continued to use it if the effect wasn't there. In your research, have you come up with that? Yeah, I guess it's like we say that, like, you make an association.
I mean, part of it is, just sticking with it. The whole idea of beauty is pain. You know what I mean?
Right. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The more they're suffering, they're like, this might really have good results.
Yeah, the closer you are to the ideal, the more painful it is.
So they would get thickening of their palms and soles. After 10 years exposure, it's basically a carcinogen. So it can cause cancer, specifically skin, bladder, or lung cancer. In the modern era, we can test for urine for arsenic poisoning, but it has a very short half-life. So if we were suspecting that only would be positive for about 4 hours after ingesting it. So hair and nail clippings would be a way we would be able to test somebody in more modern era. And if it's more of an acute poisoning, they can use something called chelation, which pulls these compounds out of your blood. But really, once damage is done, you can't undo the damage. So if this is something over a long period of time, you can't really fix it. So when you were doing this, as far as the research goes, which particular compounds were you looking at? Like lead, arsenic, mercury? What were the ones that you were looking into?
I did a lot of research, and after looking at so many different things, I did purposely leave it ambiguous. I left it purposely ambiguous because I didn't want to drop in like more attention to that rather than the association with the beauty standards themselves. But I did use a wash, which most likely would have been, I believe, a lead wash, right?
Yeah.
And then I used the creams, which those were also, I believe, lead because those were the ones that left you the porcelain face, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that's kind of it.
Yeah. So lead is the next thing coming up. So white lead, they called it Venetian ceruse. So it was lead carbonate mixed with vinegar. And that was exactly what you're speaking about, using it to make that porcelain complexion. And they would basically sort of like how somebody now would heavily put on foundation, face, neck, arms, and chest. And this actually dates way back to ancient Egypt, and it actually continued to be used into the early 1900s until, even though it was classified as a poison in the 1600s, people continued to use it. So like you kind of spoke about, that lead paint, it damages the skin, which gets covered with more paint. Again, like in the film, shows more damage. And it would actually like harden on your face. So sometimes you would not be able to make facial expressions or else it would crack.
Sounds like a poison we use now, Botox.
True. That's true. An intentional poison. So other things it could do other than making sores would be, cognitive decline. So it would affect your neurologic system. It would also cause that neuropathy, ataxia, which is difficulty walking, tremors, and then behavioral changes. Also can cause heart disease. It can cause anemia because, as we know, lead can be a cause of anemia in children. So that's the whole children with lead paint. And it could also cause kidney failure. One of the telltale signs is actually these lines that you get, these thin blue-gray deposits. So Burton's line is a thin blue-gray deposit on your gum line. And that's diagnostic. If you see that, that's lead. And they actually say Elizabeth I, you can see that in some of the paintings of her. So that's an interesting thing that she's one who was well before the Victorian era. She was in the 15 to 1600s, who was very well known for using this. Same thing, we can test it. Blood levels are pretty accurate. We still standardly test children at about a year old for lead poisoning because they're more likely to, if they live in an old home, windowsills, things like that, lead paint still exists. And you can actually see on x-ray lead because it's a heavy metal. So if somebody has significant amounts, you could actually see it on x-ray, which is kind of crazy. And then there is another type of chelation therapy where they try and remove the heavy metals from the blood. But again, it can't undo the damage that's done. So even in the modern era, it's not something we can completely cure you from. Nicole, with lead, have you ever, as far as the psychological end of things, seen any like end stage of somebody who's had maybe lead poisoning as a child or the cognitive impairments?
Not end stage, but, when children are diagnosed young, we know that they can have symptoms that look very similar to ADHD, difficulty with attention and focus, and then a lot of those behavioral dysregulation. So that's something, but I think, especially, in our lifetime in the 80s and the 70s, we realized that there was lead in paint on the walls. And so limiting that helped us kind of catch that stuff sooner so we don't see as much of that end stage anymore, unless it's, coming through like well water or things like that.
Right. Right. And our last big player is mercury. That was something that was even advertised in magazines, Harper's Bazaar in 1874. I didn't realize that magazine went back that far. But they recommended an ointment of mercury nitrate and lard rubbed on your eyelids, which sounds fun.
I think there's technically still trace amounts of mercury in red lipstick.
Well, vermilion lip tints, that's the next thing. Yeah, mercury and cinnabar. So I guess so, to achieve that color. And they used it also for acne, freckles, and skin lightening. Everybody wanted that complexion, I guess. But even as recent as 2014, they found some mercury, like you said, in some products. So the FDA limit for mercury is 1 part per million. But there were some things the FDA came across that had 10,000 parts per million in some products that were being sold illegally, but it still makes it to the market. So as far as mercury, this is where we hear about Mad Hatter's disease, right? We know about that from the Hatters, from Alice in Wonderland, I guess. That's all I know. But that effect through the skin would cause this emotional lability, memory problems, delirium, people who were really acting psychotic, essentially, because it was used in the felt of the hats. Is that something you'd see anytime modern now, Nicole, or?
No, I
No.
think we know like you were saying, we know what the safe amounts are, and so it is limited. And they've just developed newer compounds and safer things to use, so it's not necessarily what would be the go-to anymore anyway.
Right.
Although I did meet someone in grad school who claimed she had mercury poisoning and
Oh,
that
I
it made
remember.
her go blind.
Yeah.
She had a lot of other stuff going on, so I'm not sure, but yep, that was her story. But she said she got the mercury from fillings in her teeth, but she did have her fillings done in another country, so it's not out of the realm
It's
of possibility
possible.
that
Yeah.
that she could have gotten mercury through teeth fillings in another country.
Absolutely. So, there are still some more modern cases. There was a more modern case report of somebody who had something called nephrotic syndrome, which is a kidney issue. After 11 months of a mercury cosmetic treatment, somebody else who developed dementia and epilepsy, and they actually saw lesions on the MRI of their brain from a mercury skin cream for 6 years. So it's still there in case reports. I don't think it's something on my radar on my day-to-day patient care, but
Well,
it's
and I
definitely
think
out there.
This is a little slightly a departure, but I think to put it all in context, this is why a lot of the cosmetic companies went to animal testing to prevent these poisonings from happening to people. But then, of course,
But
there's the backlash of testing on animals
of
for,
course.
especially for beauty products and things like that. So,
Yeah.
but there was a purposeful progression of just putting these products and seeing what happens into testing them for safety and then now testing them for safety in other more appropriate ways.
Yeah. Same thing, chelation to try and remove it. Again, can't undo any of the really serious damage that's done. It can just get out what's still in your body at the time. All right. Couple just quick notes. Belladonna eye drops. So belladonna is actually something that we've used to make real chemical medication
It's a
compounds.
flower.
It is, but it dilates your pupils. So it gives you that real doe-eyed look and that sort of watery, glossy-eyed look. Over time, it can cause vision damage. Do not recommend. Opium to the face. I mean, not really. And then washing it off with ammonia in the morning. So I'm not really sure what we were trying to get there, but they were
Maybe like
recommended.
tightening the skin.
Yeah, they were recommended. They in the Ugly Girl Papers, which was the magazine that everyone followed.
That's what I want delivered to my house every week.
The Ugly Girl Papers, like, imagine.
So uplifting.
I know. So, we could talk a little bit about, the FDA, as Nicole was talking now. We have some rules, but they're pretty antiquated. They're based on a 1938 law. So there are really only 11 chemicals that are completely banned in the US. I did fact check this. In the European Union, there's 1,300 chemicals that are banned. So this is one place where the US is way behind. Companies don't have to prove their product is safe, and they don't have to necessarily register it with the FDA. The burden is on them to make safe products because then they can remove it retroactively, but then the damage is done. So it's not quite a perfect system at this point. And like we said, they're still finding traces of these things in products. And I guess that depends on your maker. I would say bigger companies, although we want to support small businesses. We want to support safety. So I wouldn't get the cheapest thing you can order online that comes from who knows where, maybe buy from somebody you know or from a reputable company. But I wouldn't go buying just some random product online. All right, Nicole, tell us what you think about the whole psychology of beauty, because that's where this is all real. This is where this all starts.
Right. So, when we were watching the film and then going over these notes in preparation to talk about it, I was thinking, Paula, I was wondering if when you went into this project, did you see like the almost exact parallel to things that are going on now? Like, now the ideal is K-beauty and glass skin and very, very similar aesthetic, but we're just labeling it very differently now. And I wonder if you think things have really changed all that much since Victorian times.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I don't think anything's changed since then. I think we just have different, like you said, beauty standards and different rituals associated with it, different products. But ultimately, there's still very much a pressure put on all of us, but especially women, to look a certain way. So, and we still do plenty of things, wear makeup, which there's the creative side of it, but I think a lot of people wear it not so much because of the creative, but that they wear it more because of the pressure to look good. And so I don't think a lot has changed. And like you said, so many chemicals are still constantly being found on our products that are poisoning us. And I'm sure more and more will be getting, found. And, or like you mentioned, even now we're literally injecting things
Right.
onto our body.
Yeah.
So I don't think we've been doing that long enough that maybe we fully understand even what the repercussions of those things might be down the line.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like this is unfortunately going to be a timeless subject matter. I really don't know that we will ever be at a place where this will not be relevant in some way.
I'm also curious, I'm going off book, sorry, Tara,
No, go for it. That's what it's supposed to
that
be.
Paula, you as a Latinx woman, I'm a woman of color, I'm biracial, just wondering how much things have really changed as far as the white beauty standard versus other cultural beauty standards and how there are similarities across them. Even if, we're talking about a different cultural beauty standard, it's a lot of the same stuff. And how do you think that's impacted women in Victorian times versus women now?
Yeah,
And
no,
trans women now also, I think they live up to that same beauty standard.
absolutely. I mean, I do think it affects all women regardless of culture because like you said, a lot of them are kind of the same. Especially I think nowadays that we're also connected via online and globally, I think that those beauty standards in general might be even closer to each other because of that. Because, people from all over the world are seeing everything that other people are doing. So I think there's a lot of parallel nowadays. Of course, there's the nuance between cultures, but I think a lot of the same things still apply.
I think another part that came up a little bit in your film, not to the same extent, was this kind of near death, very thin look as well. And I think that's more of those fashion things, but we're dealing with the same thing now with Ozempic and, seeing these stars who are getting scary skinny. And now people
Hmm.
are making comments about their skinny body type. But then, if they've gained weight, now there's comments about their heavier or healthier body type. And how do you think that was looked at differently in Victorian times with things like waist cinchers and where maybe it was different ways of hiding it instead of truly physically changing your body?
It's so interesting because the beauty standard as to what bodies, like women's bodies should look like, has changed so much throughout history. It's so interesting to me that pre-Victorian era, I feel like in Victorian era it kind of started changing a little bit, but how more full bodies were
Mhm.
what
The
was the most
goddess aesthetic.
desirable. Yeah, because it also symbolized, having access to food when there was scarcity around. So if you were more full, then that meant that you were higher class. But, I feel like as things started changing by the Victorian era, what it seems to me is that they were very much accentuating in the turn towards the Edwardian era. At the end of the Victorian era, they were accentuating so much of their waist and their hips, adding, bustles, padding, and such. As the Edwardian era starts to happen, then it starts becoming more of a simple line that is more of accentuates the natural body. And then obviously we know into the 20s that the whole look of it just changed to be a lot more boxy and free. So
Right.
it's interesting because I feel like as fashion also evolves, I think fashion has a lot also of input into what is expected of women's bodies to look like at certain times. But
Yeah.
it's interesting to see that change throughout time.
Yeah, I think another thing that struck me about the film was this photo looming right above their bed of the ex-wife, former wife, deceased wife, whatever she may be. And I was like, I don't know if it's the feminist in me, but that picture would have came down right away. Like, you don't have to throw it away, but she's not going to watch over our bed while, we're doing what have you. What do you think was part of your thought process in making that such an integral part of the film?
Yeah, so the reason why I wanted there to be a portrait there and that she's not taking it down is because she's so new into this environment. This character is not comfortable, and maybe this degree of wealth. She might have been someone that was from some kind of lower class that basically now has some more comfy situation when it comes to the things she has access to, but also might feel very out of place. So I wanted to, by having the photo of the previous wife still up there, it obviously shows that she's not really being tended to emotionally. They don't really necessarily care about her emotions and everything. And now she's got this thing looming over her to live up to. And I wanted to highlight also how she didn't feel like she has the authority to even be able to ask for it to be removed.
Yeah.
So it had a lot to do with just her sense of self worth already being a little bit in shambles and then being further, spiraling further with it with the cost, like toxic cosmetics and the photo of the woman reminding her that she can't live up to it.
And that rolls nicely into my next comment about, these beauty standards were not created by women. So,
Yeah.
what impact do you think that had on your main character in that she has all of these things that she has to live up to, and maybe they're not a single thing that she wants?
Yeah. No, I definitely think blank for a second.
That's okay.
But yeah, I definitely think she has a lot to live up to and a lot of work to do. And yeah, all these pressures are being put by external sources, and she's just one of the many victims who have internalized it to a degree that they feel powerless that way. And I feel like as women, we feel so much that way. It takes so much to try and stay out of that in general. But what I wanted to do also in the film, and the last shot that I have as at the end of the film, we see that she's sitting down, she's getting her portrait taken, and she's static. And then it leaves the viewer wondering, is she dead? Is she just frozen, you know? So, but right after there's the shot of both the portrait of the previous wife and her portrait on the wall now together. So that was important to me to show too, because then it leaves you wondering, like, did the previous wife go through this exact same thing and that's why she died? And it kind of creates a female solidarity of like we're all victims of the same cycle, and that was very much something I wanted to accentuate. So that's why the ending is the way it is.
I'm glad you brought that up because when Tara and I were watching it, I was like, it's her death portrait. And Tara's like, I don't know. I don't think so. And I'm like, yes, it is. It's her death portrait. They did that.
We definitely
Yeah,
had to have like different perspectives. So I think that's exactly
yeah,
what you were looking for. So that's
yeah. I
wonderful.
left it, like I said, I left it ambiguous because I wanted people to wonder that. And
Yeah.
it's up to everyone how they take it, literal or metaphorical. But ultimately, she was still the victim of something. You know.
Yeah. I think too, and this goes along with those exact words, being the victim of something, it almost kind of draws a parallel to addiction. You need this product, the product makes the problem gets worse, you use more product, then you have to use more of it to try to cover up the problem, and it's just this endless cycle. And I think it's, even though you're talking about beauty standards and feminism and all of these other things, I think it can connect to so many other issues in the world. Was that something that came up for you as you were writing or as you were filming?
I mean, yeah, it's definitely, I think that our relationship to products can be an addiction, in a sense, especially nowadays because it's so accessible. It's just the amount of times that you're on social media and you're just being bombarded by influencers promoting the next skincare thing or the next, brush for your face. I don't know. There's so much information being put on us that just it's a constant reminder of like these are all the things that you can be doing. And yeah, I feel like it takes so much to just try and block that out.
Yeah. I mean, being a parent of a teenager and a preteen, both young women, it's definitely something I'm very mindful of because right now we do not allow social media. Yes, of course, they see YouTube videos, they see shorts, they see things like that. But I'm trying to do my best to stop all of that external and live in the here and now in real life. And this is who we are in real life. That aesthetic that you see doesn't exist. That is all put on. So it is something that definitely speaks to me because I want to raise young women who do believe in themselves, no matter what they are, use their brains, use their humor, use their kindness, and not just be fed all of this external information.
I think part of it too with social media is, and maybe this is just me being a little too hopeful about our society, is I feel like we as women maybe are a little bit more in control of what we want the beauty standards to be, but we're still buying it from each other and saying, I want to
Yeah.
look like her, like she's great.
Yeah.
I want to have her hair and her skin and that blush, and I need that eye cream. Trust me, I bought like 5 of those stupid tightening eye creams off a TikTok shop. None of them work. But I feel like even though we have a bigger role in what we say we want to look like, has it really changed all that?
No.
No. Yeah,
It
we're
has not.
still kind of, setting ourselves up for this ideal that even, the most beautiful people in the world still have their problems and still have daily struggles. And, it doesn't, this idea that we're chasing of perfection isn't real. And I don't know if we're ever going to fully embrace that.
Yeah, I mean, we went from our generation, Cosmo and 17 magazine and all those static, pictures of
And
ideal
heroin
to
chic. Yes.
right to now it's literally every time you pick up this little computer in your hand, it's at your face showing you. So it was a little different then. You could at least close that and walk away. Now it's everywhere.
Well, psychologically, I blame Zoom because I've never had to look at myself this much since having to
Oh,
use Zoom. I never looked at myself as much as I do now, and I hate it.
that's funny. Actually, I feel like my static pictures I'm more judgmental of, but seeing my animated self I'm more comfortable with. So at least there's that.
That's true. That's true. You see
But
different
there is
facets of
something
yourself.
to that. There is definitely something to that too. You're right. I mean, especially in the past, I feel like, we're in a time where we're seeing ourselves so much. I don't think our brain is designed to be able to take that information.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
even
Yeah.
just to see a reflection so much. I don't think biologically that is something that, yeah, our brain
right. Yeah,
is
that you
used
were
to.
set up for. No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. That's absolutely true.
Yeah.
I mean, everywhere you go, someone's taking a selfie, somebody's doing this. I mean, growing up, pictures, our parents, it was in an album on a paper picture. That's all you got on that roll of film, and that's how life was, and you just got to remember it that way. Now you have how many pictures a day?
Mhm.
So quite interesting. Anything else, Nicole, you can think of to touch on?
Well, it's not about this, but I was wondering what other projects are you working on, Paula? Anything that
Yeah.
we can keep an eye out for or help promote?
Yeah, of course. I'm actually right now I'm developing my first feature film,
Mm,
and surprise, it's a period piece. This one's set in like 1914 Mexico during the Mexican Revolution. And
Okay.
it's basically a queer romance and also a bit of a coming of age in the sense that the main character is battling a lot with the sense of tradition and familial duty and also forging her own path and her drive to do so. So yeah, that's a little bit.
That's
It's called
exciting.
Favela. Yeah.
oh, I love that.
Yeah.
We will keep an eye out for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We'll definitely link all of your website, your socials, your IMDb, all those things in our show notes so our listeners can know where to find you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really neat. Me, myself being the logical, non artistic person, I really look up to people who have that in them and that creativity. And I think it's beautiful the way, you can express yourself. So it's super exciting. And we'll be looking for your future to hopefully continue to grow.
Thank you so much. And honestly, it means so much to me also that you guys reached out to me because, when you're making a short, you're just hoping to get it out there and for it to be seen and for people to get the message. So it's really amazing to have a podcast, like you guys reach out because you found it randomly on the internet. And that's
Yeah.
amazing. So
Yeah.
just having done that, and then another thing that this short also got me access to, I recently went and shadow directed on the Gilded Age HBO show for 3 weeks.
That's
Wow.
amazing.
And that was partially because of making this short that you guys watched, the English Roast, because I was able to send that as part of my portfolio to the program I went through with Warner Brothers. And so it's just amazing that to see something that came out of an interest of this specific part of history, my own ambitions, when it comes to feminism and telling stories about women's struggles, for it to have had this degree of outreach is just, it's everything to me. So thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you for
Of
having me.
course, that's so amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
I know that Tara and I were always looking for small businesses, up and coming people, but also just people who are creative and they're doing something different outside the box. We love to support that because that's kind of how we're trying to get out there too. It's like we're doing something different. We want to always support other women in their endeavors, but it's just really cool to meet these people who you might not know otherwise and hear about so many exciting things that other folks are doing. So it's really been great to meet you and talk with you.
Likewise.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. So thanks for listening to Medical Media Mixer.
The perfect cocktail. Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Medical Media Mixer podcast. If you enjoyed the conversation, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review us on your favorite podcast platform. Your support helps others find the show. Want to keep the conversation going? Follow us on social media. We're at Medical Media Mixer Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube, and on Pinterest, the Medical Media Mixer board.
If you'd like to support the show and help us grow, check us out on Patreon, patreon.com/Medical Media Mixer Podcast. And on Buy Me a Coffee, buymeacoffee.com/Medical Media Mixer Podcast. If you have a topic idea, feedback, or just want to say hi, send us an email at medicalmediamixer@gmail.com. You can also stream all of our episodes and find more info on our website, medicalmediamixer.podbean.com. We're available on all major podcast platforms, so no matter where you listen, we're there. Thanks again for listening, and until next time, keep mixing medicine and media.